week on FYI, want to see some amazing experiments? I checked out the Ministry of Science Live.
And what do birds and the Battle of Britain have in common? We speak to author Dermot O Leary about his latest book. Hello, welcome to FYI, your weekly news show.
And as usual, we've got loads of info for you.
But first, this week we've got some amazing news from the American Space Agency, NASA. Check this out. This space capsule contains a priceless handful of dust from a 4.5 billion-year-old asteroid named Bennu. And it has successfully touched down in the desert in the USA.
The capsule took the dust and rocks from the mountain-sized asteroid in 2020 and travelled over 1 billion miles through the solar system to get back to Earth.
Scientists across the world will now study the sample. They think it contains some of the universe's oldest materials and hope it will reveal secrets about how the sun and the planets were formed.
That's really cool. Something not so cool, though, is fake news. And here at FYI, we like to investigate supposed news stories that might actually be made up. We saw posts going viral on social media suggesting there isn't a climate change problem at all, with people using this chart to back up their claims. Taking information from disaster databases, it seems to show weather-related deaths have actually fallen over the past 100 years.
But is that true? And if so, do fewer deaths from climate disasters really mean there isn't a climate emergency? We'll let you know later in the show.
While many are, of course, hugely concerned by climate change, none more so than a group of children and young people from Portugal. They're so worried they're taking their country and 32 other European countries to court, including the UK.
Yeah, so after seeing the damage caused by wildfires in Portugal, they believe countries haven't done enough to stop global warming. So this week, in the first ever climate change case, they've gone to the European Courts of Human Rights to try to force countries to do more.
Now, it could take up to 18 months for a verdict, so we'll keep you posted.
Meanwhile, a controversial new oil field in UK waters have just been given the go-ahead to start drilling for fossil fuels. And the man leading the organisation who gave the approval is in this week's FYI Climate Change Hot Seat. The race to beat climate change is on.
But who's most to blame for the greenhouse gas emissions that are destroying our environment? How much is down to big businesses?
You're the ones allowing for new oil and gas fields to be built.
How can airlines say that they're going to be net zero if you're increasing the number of planes in the air?
In this mini-series, we explore what some major companies are doing to combat their carbon footprint, and we put their leaders in the hot seat. The North Sea, a vast, stormy part of the Atlantic Ocean off the east coast of Britain, where for many years we've drilled for oil and gas. The burning of these fossil fuels release greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, trapping heat and causing global warming. The North Sea Transition Authority, or NSTA, was set up by the government in 2015 to oversee the UK's oil and gas resources and to help the country get to net zero emissions, including the repurposing of existing oil and gas platforms for renewable energy projects. I met their Chief Executive Officer, Stuart Payne, to see how they're shaping the UK's energy future.
Let's be honest, you guys are almost displayed as the bad guys because you're letting new oil and gas fields be built.
The whole industry that we work with has got a challenge to tell its story. That's true. 3/4 of the energy that you use today and that I use today comes from oil and gas. We need that energy, so we need it to come from somewhere.
Now, the International Energy Agency says that if the UK wants to hit its goal of net zero by 2050, then we have to stop drilling for new oil and gas now.
It's not going to happen overnight. We import half the energy that we're using already. We use an awful lot of gas in the UK to power things, to heat things. You can import gas. One of the big ways of doing it is called LNG, liquefied natural gas. You basically freeze gas, put it on a boat and sail it around the world. We get a lot of our gas from LNG, and it's got a carbon footprint 2.5 times the gas that we make in the North Sea. We want to maximise the amount of energy that comes from the UK. We can control emissions on that.
Even so, there remains big concerns that the transition away from oil and gas isn't fast enough. For years now, people have been protesting against the use of fossil fuels.
As a young person and speaking on the behalf of young people, it can sometimes feel like we do the protest, but we don't really ever get our proper say.
Being honest, I think you're selling your generation a bit short. You've got a huge amount of power and you're wielding it. Net zero is written into law. It's a thing that the country has to do. Is protesting enough? It's not. It's really not. I respect the right of people to protest and be angry and be worried, but you've also got to get on and help fix it. Everything we do has got a carbon footprint. Where we buy our clothes, how we travel, how we live our lives.
While we all have to do our bit, some things like making our homes more energy efficient are really expensive and really hard to do when money is short. Many say it's partly the energy company's fault by making too much profit.
Shell has just announced soaring profits.
BP announces record profits.
British gas profits rise by nearly 900%.
In terms of profits, this industry's got stupid numbers. I have a lot of sympathy with people sitting at home with rocketing fuel bills. I want to make sure that as much of those profits that are being made are being reinvested in the UK, because the same people who make those profits are the people who are investing in the energy transition. Just in the North Sea, we expect there to be about £220 billion spent between now and 2030. That's between wind, hydrogen, oil and gas, CCS, carbon storage, 220 billion. That's just in the next 7 years. That money is coming from those companies.
The carbon capture and storage Stuart mentions is a cutting-edge technology that aims to capture carbon dioxide emissions from industry and power plants so it doesn't get into the atmosphere. The captured CO2 is then transported to storage sites, some of it back under the sea where the oil and gas came from in the first place.
We have the ability to trap exactly the same amount of carbon that we've produced since like the 1760s. A big part of our job is to license how that works. If I can safely store the carbon without it ever polluting anywhere, it can be a way of making that power generation completely clean.
In the summer of 2023, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the NSTA announced 100+ new drilling licences, and they've just given the go-ahead for the largest remaining untapped oil field in UK waters, Rosebank, off the west coast of the Shetland Islands. Opponents are calling the decision environmental vandalism, saying it will destroy the UK's climate commitments.
If you are 100% committed to saving the planet, then why are you inviting companies to apply for a licence to drill for oil and gas?
We should use our own energy today for the power demands we've got today. We look at all applications through what's called a effective net zero test, which allows us to say, does that keep us within the safe bounds? And safe bounds being that 1.5 degree climate test.
The NSTA insists it can be trusted to get to net zero by 2050, winding down the use of oil and gas, while building up the roles of clean energy and carbon storage. Stuart wants the best minds in the country to help develop the groundbreaking technology needed to hit their targets.
There's been huge progress made, but if I listen to some people, they will tell you nothing's happened. Well, if you keep telling an industry that nothing's happened, you risk alienating the very cool people I need to stay in that industry and make a difference.
So if we do want to be making a difference in helping to save our planet in the future, I guess subjects like science and technology are a great place to start, right?
Yeah, definitely. And if you're like me and you really like science, you're going to love this next report. And if you don't, maybe this will change your mind. I went along to check out the Ministry of Science live. This show aims to ignite the future scientist or engineer in all of us, literally. The Ministry of Science Live say they're on a mission to show how exciting science really is. But how do they plan to do that? Especially since some of us find science quite a difficult subject.
I think children learn more when they don't think of it as a lesson.
Yeah.
The kids come to the show and they're excited and they're buzzing because they're in the theatre, seeing it live, seeing all the explosions and everything, so it just brings it to life.
So you guys here do a lot of tricks and a lot of experiments, but what's your favourite one?
My favourite is the shadow wall. So we get 2 volunteers up on stage and we get them to stand against our special wall and shine a UV light at it. And then the wall will gain the energy and start glowing. But because the kids are in the way, we actually capture their shadow when they step away, and it gets a really lovely reaction from the audience.
That sounds so cool. I'm really excited because Mike told me he's going to show me one of his favourite experiments, up close and personal. But I have to wear these.
Ready, Maya?
Ready. Remember, these guys are experts. Do not try this at home. That's sick. That was awesome. So, Mike, how does that experiment actually work?
Well, the water contained washing up liquid, so when we turned the canister upside down and we pushed down, the gas was released, but the washing up liquid created bubbles, so we could contain the flammable gas. And when we put the lighter to it, of course, it will ignite and will create heat, light, and sound energy in one experiment.
So that was unbelievable, like a real-life magic trick.
As the liquid nitrogen on the flowers hits the air...
Give them a shake, everybody!
Genius!
Yeah, I think the show is really exciting, and I can totally see why science is easier to learn through big experiments and loud bangs than just textbooks.
Now we're going back in time to a very important event in World War II. The author and TV presenter Dermot O Leary loves his history, and his new book is a bird's take on a very crucial battle.
A bird? Okay.
Yep. Scarlett spoke to him to find out more.
Let me take you back to the Battle of Britain, which raged for more than 3 months, not on the ground but in the skies. Britain's Royal Air Force, the RAF, faced a tough fight defending the UK. They were outnumbered by Nazi Germany's pilots, but the RAF's skill helped secure victory and stop the Nazis invading Britain. Now, what has this all got to do with birds?
Dermot, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks a million, Scarlett. It's nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So your new book is called Wings of Glory, and it's set in 1940. So can you tell me just a bit more about it?
Well, I've always loved history, and I thought, well, what's my favourite? Well, I love the Battle of Britain. So I'll go down that route. So, well, of course, if it's the Battle of Britain, there's got to be birds. And anyway, quite quickly it came to me that the animals are fighting on our behalf. And I thought, well, okay, so we've got the RAF, so why can't we have the RBF, the Royal Bird Force? So I've got a Swift, so Linus and his sister Ava both sign up, and then they embark on their adventure to come back to be basically fighter pilots in the RBF, the Royal Bird Force. Obviously, birds can't actually take down planes, but the idea is that they harass them, and they do this through largely pooing on their windscreens.
Yes, that bit made me laugh. But you know, as you're saying, like, it's so important that young people learn about history. And I feel like from adding animals in, you know, you're learning and it's also something you can enjoy. So it's just such a good idea.
Yeah, I really enjoy writing through the viewpoint of animals because you can just create your own world.
So why do you think it's still so important that us young people learn about the Battle of Britain?
I think it's really important that if you accept every country's done some good stuff in history, you have to accept that they've also done some bad stuff, but also be proud of the stuff that has gone on in the past that the country did some good for. And a classic example of that is the stand that the country took in the Second World War, and especially at the start of the war. And the Battle of Britain, really important to remember, that's not exclusively English pilots. There were so many pilots from around the world who came over, and men and women who served in the RAF.
Well, Dermot, thank you so much for joining me and answering my questions.
Thanks a million, Scarlett. It's lovely talking to you.
So, what do you make of this graph being shared online, showing fewer deaths from climate-related disasters?
Although deaths from extreme weather have been falling over the past 100 years, which is of course good news, the claims on social media that this means there isn't a climate crisis is fake news.
Experts say that the drop in deaths is largely down to us being better prepared for climate disasters like wildfires, flooding, and droughts. The number and intensity of climate-related emergencies has actually increased greatly. So the graph is a classic case of using one fact to try and prove a totally different fact.
Yeah, definitely something to watch out for. Well, that's just about it for this week, but we want to leave you with some amazing footage of a rarely seen type of octopus.
It's nicknamed the Dumbo octopus because it looks similar to the famous elephant cartoon character, Dumbo.
Yeah, I see it.
See you next week. Bye!
Bye.